Wednesday, March 8, 2022 special board meeting to order. We are convened as of 5:31 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I would respectfully ask everyone to remain muted unless you are recognized to speak. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Please note that the official meetings of the RTD Board of Directors are being held remotely in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. The official meetings of the Board of Directors will be held via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. Pardon me, I have a cold also, so if I stop to cough, I apologize. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. Visit rtd-denver.com. And a live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. Colleagues, being elected as a member of this body imposes an ethical obligation for each of us to enhance and maintain the public confidence in this agency. As a board of directors, it is our collective duty to our constituents, stakeholders, and staff to conduct our business in an atmosphere of mutual respect, cooperation, civility, trust, and collegiality. These are the values we can all agree upon. As such, I encourage each of us to review the operating guidelines adopted by this board and to act in accordance with those principles, which are available on the Board of Directors page on the RTD website. Thank you. I guess it was Ms. McManus here. Will you call the roll, or should I? I'll call the roll. Director Bouquet.
Present.
Director Broom.
Present.
Director Busick here. Director Catlin.
Here.
Director Cook.
Here.
Director Davidson.
Here.
Director Deschelle.
Here.
Director Geisinger.
Here.
Director Lewis.
Present.
Director Revere Malpietti.
Here.
And where are you? Where's here, Director Revere Malpietti?
I'm in the Caribbean Sea in Playa del Carmen.
Okay, that's enough. Director Rosenthal. I don't see Paul yet. Director Sloan.
Here.
Director Tisdale.
Present.
Director Whitmore.
Live from Adams County, I am present.
And Director Williams.
Good evening, Chair Busick. I also am here.
Thank you. With 14 present and 1 absent, we do have a quorum. Next, we move into our public comment phase. This period is open to anyone who would like to address the board. Those who would like to address the board but are unable to attend board meetings can submit their comments in writing at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. Jillian R. Teichray, were any emailed comments received for tonight's meeting?
We did not receive any email comments today.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll move on. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. Staff will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you are dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you are being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will have to be submitted in writing, and you will not have the opportunity to speak this evening. If any speaker has documentation or reference materials for the board, please email those materials to the board office at the following email address: rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. During this time, the board will not offer comments or responses. Directors or staff may contact speakers following their comments if they raise matters that lend themselves to follow-up. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names, and each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. Speakers, please refrain from profane or obscene speech, direct your comments to the board as a whole, and refrain from personal attacks. Do we have any speakers?
We do not have any at this time.
Thanks, Jillian. No one is signed up. With no participants in the queue, we'll close the public participation period at this time. There's one recommended action on the agenda tonight, listed as item Roman 4, Action A, and the action is for the Board of Directors to adopt the Director District Map identified as Alternative E as in Edward, revised in accordance with the following discussion and as recommended by Chair Busick and Directors Broom and Sloan. The adoption of this action will support the agency's strategic priorities of community value and customer excellence. Do I have a motion?
So
So
moved,
moved.
Director Williams.
I have Williams and a second by Rivera Malpietti.
Chair, you're muted.
Or your volume went away.
Mr. Chairman, you are muted.
I'm going to start the meeting over. We had a motion and a motion by Director Williams and a second by Director Rivera Malpietti. I would ask General Manager Johnson or Bill Van Meter, Assistant General Manager Planning, to present any pertinent information regarding this action to the board.
Thank you, Chair. This is Bill Van Meter, Assistant General Manager for Planning, and Chris Quinn, our project manager for this redistricting action item, is also in attendance as a support. Just a very brief note, we had a very smooth, robust, and open process for this regular state required, legislatively required decennial redistricting to assure even representation among the 15 board member districts. We appreciate the support and leadership from Directors Broom and Sloan. As the committee, we had a number of public meetings and public hearings, reported that input, and were able to arrive at what I believe is a very solid recommendation. And the final note that I would add is that the reason for this special meeting, as noted in the board report and as the board has heard before, is because the deadline for board approval with a 2/3 supermajority is March 15th of this year. And so it's been a solid process, and I appreciate the support and interest and look forward to your action.
Thanks very much for that. And thank you and your team for your support and work on this. And thank all the board members also who participated. Is there any discussion? Director Lewis.
I really appreciate this process, and I appreciate the opportunity to bring community into the discussion. And I just want to say, for the sake of the record, that I will miss my 5 Points people, and there is no way, shape, or form that this is associated with you all and my opportunity or ability to lead you, but this being the map that I believe best represents the entire region, and more specifically allows that district to have representation as well. So just want to say that for the sake of the record and for my constituents.
Thank you for those comments. Director Williams.
Director Lewis, you can come hang out with me down there anytime you want. We would love to have you.
I still do. I was just at Welton Street Cafe, so we're good.
Just don't come north. Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, are there any directors opposed? Seeing no directors in opposition, we will declare this unanimous of the board members present with 14 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 1 director absent. Okay, we're going to move on to other matters. Are there any other matters to come before the board? Great. In a moment, the directors are going to meet in executive session. So I'm going to ask for a motion to move into executive session pursuant to 24-6-402(4) Colorado Revised Statutes to receive legal advice, and section 24-6-402(4) Colorado Revised Statutes for determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations regarding the successor collective bargaining agreement with the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1001. Do I have a motion?
Tisdale, so moved.
Tisdale. Who was the second?
Rivera
Broom.
Malpietti.
Broom. I got you, Bob. Sorry, Angie. Director Catlin, I see your hand raised. You have discussion?
I am not able to access the link. And so I have asked General Counsel Snyder to resend it.
Okay.
So if we could just take a few moments to make sure that we all are able to access the meeting, I'd sure appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll wait for you on the other side. Is there any discussion on the motion? Are there any directors in opposition to the motion to move into executive session? Seeing none, that passes 14-0 with one director absent. Everybody that is now entitled to participate in the executive session, let's come back. Are we going to return back here? Yeah, we'll go in. I think we're going to come back to this meeting after our executive session and then adjourn and go into our committee meeting. So let's head out of here and go into the executive session.
Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000, option 4, or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000, option 4, or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations. And always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000 option 4 or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations. And always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000 option 4 or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations. And always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000 option 4 or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000 option 4 or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000 option 4 or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000, option 4, or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000, option 4, or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000, option 4, or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000 option 4 or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000 option 4 or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000, option 4, or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region. Have you lost or forgotten an item on a bus or train? Call Lost and Found at 303-299-6000, option 4, or fill out a customer form online at rtd-denver.com. If you see something, say something. When riding a train or bus, report any suspicious activity or packages to RTD's Transit Watch. Call 303-299-2911 or text 303-434-9100. The University of Colorado A-Line and the Skyride bus service offer convenient, affordable options to get to and from Denver International Airport. Regional airport fare is $10.50 from anywhere in the RTD service area. Check schedules online at rtd-denver.com or use the RTD mobile app to plan your trip and purchase tickets. At RTD, your safety is our #1 priority. Remember to keep a safe social distance from other riders at bus stops and train stations, and always wear your mask while waiting for or riding with RTD. As we clean and disinfect our vehicles daily, we ask you to be our partners in safety and mask up. Can't find exact change? Running behind schedule? Download the RTD mobile ticketing app on your mobile device to pay your fare with a debit or credit card and bypass lines and ticket kiosks. Let your phone be your gateway to travel in and around the region.
So now on my other computer, it says unable to start video because the host has stopped it.
Ooh, Vince, let her in.
It's Peggy. I have no idea what's going on there. I'm not the
Like a
host.
special helmet because we've been, traveling from place to place virtually. We'd like a Starman helmet or something.
Okay.
Okie dokie.
Who are we missing? Let's see. Okay. Who can tell me the director that's missing other than Director Rosenthal?
Oh, sugar. Director Busick.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I'm yeah. I'm here.
Director Broom.
He's here.
There he is. Okay, good.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
I always get a poor pole position.
Yeah. I'm counting 13, so we're missing somebody.
Ms. McManus has her hand up.
No, Director Cook's on there too.
Geisinger? Geisinger.
I'm counting all 15.
Are you?
You should do roll call again, Mr. Chair.
Good idea.
Why don't we start with a roll call? Director Bouquet.
I'm present.
Director Broom.
Present.
Director Busick's here. Director Catlin.
Here.
Director Cook.
Here.
Director Davidson. Director Davidson. There you go.
Here.
I see you. Director Deschelle.
Here.
Director Geisinger.
Here.
Director Lewis.
That's it.
Director Rivera Malpietti.
Here.
Director Rosenthal. Director Sloan.
Here.
Director Tisdale.
Present.
Director Whitmore.
Here.
Director Williams.
Good evening. I'm here.
Okay, great. I miscounted, I suppose. And before we sign off, I want to recognize that this is International Women's Day. And I want to recognize and salute the women of RTD, from our board members to our GM and CEO, to the women that drive our buses and trains, and everybody in between. Without you, we couldn't make this happen. Thank you very much. And with that, do I have a meeting to adjourn?
So moved. Director Williams.
Second? Second is who?
You.
Director Whitmore. Any opposed? Seeing none, Director Davidson, do you want to take a 5-minute break before the Finance Committee starts?
That sounds great, Chair Busick. We'll reconvene at 6:20.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take about 2 more minutes and then we'll reconvene. Started in 1 more minute. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Great. All right, the Finance and Planning Committee will now come to order. We are convened as of 6:20 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I would respectfully ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you are recognized to speak. Thank you for joining us this evening. Please note that under our current circumstances, the official meetings of the RTD Board of Directors are being held remotely in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. For the immediate future, the official meetings of the Board of Directors will be held via Zoom, here we are, and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practicable to the board's website. Visit rtd-denver.com and scroll to the bottom of the page for the link to Board of Directors. Directors and members of staff, for the sake of the record, if you would like to be acknowledged during tonight's meeting, I would ask that you please raise your virtual hand and wait for me to call on you before proceeding to speak, as speaking out of turn, as we all know, will add to the confusion to both the record and the proceedings. Directors and staff participating by phone, you can raise your virtual hands to indicate that you'd like to speak by pressing *9, and you can toggle your mute setting with *6. I'll go ahead and now call the roll for the committee members, starting with Director Broom.
Present.
Director Catlin.
Present.
Director Cook.
Here.
Director Deschelle.
Here.
Director Geisinger.
Here.
And Director Whitmore.
Present.
And I am here. So we have all 7 committee members in attendance, 0 absent. And for the record, I'd like to note that we see Directors Busick, Director Bouquet, Director Lewis, Director Rivera-Melpieti, Director Sloan, Director Tisdale, and Director Williams. Am I missing anyone? Thank you for joining us. Those of you not on the committee, seeing no more, I'll go ahead and proceed. We're going to go into the public comment section of the committee meeting. I will open up the public comment to anyone who would like to address this committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your telephone. Staff will unmute you when it is your time to speak. If you are dialed in, press *6 to toggle those mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you are agreeing to be recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will have to be submitted in writing, and you will not have the opportunity to speak. If any speaker has documentation or reference materials for this committee, or if any member of the public would like to submit written comments, please email those materials to our board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. During public comments, the committee will not offer any comments in response. Directors or staff may contact speakers following their comments if they raise matters that lend themselves to follow-up. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Speakers, please refrain from any profane, obscene speech, and please direct your comments to this committee as a whole and refrain from any personal attacks. Thank you very kindly for that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and take a look. I do not see any hands raised. Ms. McManus, can you confirm that I am not missing anybody from the public who would like to speak?
This is Taishrei. I don't see anyone in the queue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taishrei. Much appreciated. All right. Seeing none in the queue, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period at this time. Thank you. And just a reminder, this will be happening at all the committee meetings, so please feel free to join us in the future. We have no information from external entities this evening, so we'll go ahead and skip through that section. We do have one recommended action on the agenda this evening. That recommended action is for the delegation of authority and competitive selection. This is for the board of directors to approve a resolution regarding the delegation of authority and competitive selection, which updates the delegations of purchasing and contracting, budget transfer, and settlement authority consistent with the board's bylaws, the RTD Act, and regulations published by the Federal Transit Administration. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Vice Chair of this committee, second Vice Chair Catlin is the mover. Do I have a second?
Second, Whitmore.
Treasurer Whitmore, thank you. A second. At this time, I will ask Mr. Doug McLeod, our Chief Financial Officer, to present any pertinent information regarding the action.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. This is Doug McLeod, Chief Financial Officer. Just a quick summary of this action item. So the board has delegated certain authority to the general manager and CEO, as well as some authority to the general counsel. This resolution includes certain purchasing, contracting, budget transfer, and legal settlement authorities. This delegation was last updated 15 years ago in 2007, and the intent of this action item is to bring changes, to bring the resolution to more current terms as well as current amounts, and provide more transparency by being more explicit with terminology and items covered under the GM CEO's authority. So this resolution is due for an update also to make it consistent with the board bylaws, the RTD Act, and FTA regulations. Just to summarize some of the changes that are included in this resolution, it clarifies certain terms such as the meaning of the word contract. It defines items that are included in routine operational procurements such as utilities, facilities, and infrastructure maintenance, insurance premiums, computer hardware and software, and the like. I'd also like to point out that one item that is not listed is safety and security contracts. Those are excluded from routine business that the GM would have authority to approve. So such contracts regarding safety and security that are over $2 million would still come to the board for approval. In addition, there are increases to the contractual authority of the general manager and CEO. In the former resolution from 2007, those limits were set at $1 million. We're proposing those be increased to $2 million to recognize the impact of inflation and bring to current costs over those 15 years. It also defines the authority for contract amendments to be up to 25% of the original contract amount, in which the GM would have authority to make approval of those amendments. So essentially all contracts that are $2 million or more will still come to the board for approval. Authority for legal settlements up to limits established by the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act are referenced to those limits, giving general counsel the ability to make settlements for under that authority. Previously, the resolution included a fixed amount, so we want the flexibility for that to change with state law. And then small business enterprise contracts, purchase requisitions, and sole source contract thresholds for competitive bids We're requesting those be increased from 100,000 to 250,000, also to recognize the effects of inflation over the past 15 years. The final adjustment to authority amounts, authorized amounts, is to budget transfers. Previously, any budget transfers 500,000 or above would come to the board. We're requesting that amount be increased to $1 million, also in recognition of inflation. In addition, the general manager and CEO will provide monthly reports to the boards of all new contracts executed during the month in the interest of full transparency. That concludes my remarks, Mr. Chair, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. Much appreciated. At this time, I'll ask anybody who has questions to please raise your virtual hand. I'll go through any directors who are on this call, although just a reminder, we'll have the vote among the committee members whether to proceed to the board of directors. I'll go in the order that I see them come up here on the list. Mr. Chair Busick.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Doug, prior to this change, did the spending limit not apply to safety and security contracts?
This is Doug McLeod, Chair.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Thank you for the question. I'd ask General Counsel Snyder to comment on that.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Melanie Snyder, General Counsel. So yes, Director Busick, the prior delegation addressed routine procurements for operational goods and services and gave a few examples, things like diesel fuel, but it was a list that was not all inclusive. So historically, there were a number of items, including safety and security contracts, that were included or addressed under that delegation.
Okay, so with this change, with this change that's before this committee, the general manager couldn't approve a 3-year, $60 million security contract without first coming to the board. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. That's all I have.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder, Mr. McLeod, Chair Busick. Moving on down the list here, Director Cook, please.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of quick questions. I had a chance to talk to General Counsel Snyder, and so that was really helpful. And thank you also for delimiting the procurement items, as Chair Busick had asked about. That's great. On the 2007 authorization included a cumulative amount that would trigger things to be brought to the board. As I understand from talking to her, on packet page 6, bottom of the page, item number 6, it says contract amendments and change orders as may be necessary from time to time, not to exceed 25% of the contract amount. General Counsel Snyder clarified that that's the original contract. So my question is, and to the extent with our new committees, the intent is to work through some of this. Is that sufficiently clear? I mean, is that ambiguous language, and should we add the word original contract before contract?
Thank you for your question. Perhaps Ms. Snyder, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that would be an appropriate adjustment to just eliminate any doubt. So what you're saying is at the bottom of packet page 6 in section B6 at the very bottom of the page that talks about contract amendments and change orders, you would add the language about contract amendments and change orders as may be necessary from time to time, not to exceed 25% of the original contract amount.
Thank you. And then one other along that same line, on packet page 8, it says that the general manager shall provide a monthly report to the board of the contracts executed during the previous month pursuant to the resolution. And as I understand, the intent for that is to be provided with the board briefing documents. But that's a practice that's changed or may change. And I just thought, in the interests of being clear on it and telling the world too, what about adding the wording to the board, comma, and posted on the website, comma, of the contracts executed during the previous month? You all, that's my thought. I'm happy to make a motion to amend or just, leave it to you, Chair, to how to handle that kind of suggestion in this less formal committee setting. Thank you.
I'm wondering, Ms. Snyder, thank you, Director Cook, and thank you for that initial change there. Ms. Snyder, could you comment on the implications that might have, a change like that might have, and comment as you did for the first?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that that clarification would work. We could certainly add language to make it clear that those monthly reports will continue to be posted on the board's website. If I could recommend, it might make sense to go through all the comments, and then maybe we can have one motion at the end of that discussion to make some of these adjustments we're talking about to ensure we have consensus from the committee.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That was my next question for you, Ms. Snyder. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Let's go through all the comments and see if we have an amendment. Director DeShell, please.
Thank you, Chair. My comments may not be as globally acceptable as Director Cook, so if you want to do them separately, that's fine. My first question is there a reason that we aren't pegging these numbers to CPIU for Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, or whatever the equivalent is, so that we don't need to continue to update this due to inflation?
I'm wondering, Mr. McLeod, if you could field that one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and essentially what happens is if you were to take the 15 years, doubling of that of each of these amounts which we're requesting is effectively approximately a 5% compounded annual increase. That may sound a little higher than CPI, but the intent would be to set that new amount here, and it would be in effect going forward and account for future CPI. So that was really the intent of getting there. And also we wanted to keep it to nice round amounts that are much easier to deal with and for the staff to understand.
Fair enough, understood. My second question or comment would be, if to the extent the general manager is making the change, and I recognize that, I'm suggesting this not in light of our current GM, but trying to plan for the future, what the future might look like. Some sort of language that states that to the extent we are making a contract amendment or executing a change order, that we tie that to our strategic plan, right? That extra spend that we're choosing to approve is somehow tied to the strategic plan, avoiding scope creep, things of that nature, to really make sure that we have that backed up, and that contract changes aren't made that aren't in alignment with our overall goals.
Director DeShell, was it a question or that you'd like somebody to respond to?
Yeah, curious if General Counsel Snyder thinks that would be too restrictive to avoid the entire purpose of this. Just trying to put some backstop there. Make sure we're continuing, we're making changes without board approval, that it is tied to the strategic plan with the board.
I think if I understand the question, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure, please.
Thank you. So Director DeShell, I think you're asking if there is a way to add some additional limitations on the general manager and CEO's authority to amend contracts. So that language we just discussed that Director Cook was talking about, to have language in there that would tie it to strategic plan metrics or objectives.
Correct.
Okay. I understand the concept. I think it might prove to be challenging and maybe potentially unworkable as we think about the different types of procurements and contracts that we enter into. And certainly the fact that the board has a 5-year strategic plan with metrics that are, sort of are prioritized over that period. I would defer to GM and CEO Johnson if she has any ideas about how we might tie each contract amendment to a specific objective in the strategic plan. It's not to say we couldn't create language to do it. My concern is just more operationalizing that and how that would work.
If I may, thank you, Ms. Snyder. If I may, I'd like to maybe just ask to see if there's comments from directors, and then if it, depending on where folks are at, we could ask Ms. Johnson how she might approach that. Director DeShell, I would kick things off by saying I like where your head's at. I think that's a good thing for us to be thinking about. I would say that what that comes down to is our trust in our general manager and CEO, and that as part of our oversight, this would be something that falls on the oversight of the CEO and general manager. That are we actually working towards our strategic plan? If not, we have a greater problem. So perhaps given the complexity of working that language in, I might say let's not get that into this particular aspect, but continue to be mindful of that in this as we move forward as an agency. But let me open the floor to just other directors to see if there's any further discussion, and then maybe Ms. Johnson could comment. Director Cook, is your comment along this line?
You know, I was wondering too whether, it's sort of like it, the question of whether, even if the thresholds aren't met, there are policy implications of a contract amendment. And sort of as a, a signing statement, I would say, I would hope the GM in her judgment would feel free to bring those to us. It may be that sometimes a small contract amendment has a bigger impact than one that's larger. And I don't know how to codify that. I really don't. So all I would say is I kind of like you, Chair, I agree with where he's going. I like the idea that we have some, hewing to where we want to go. I just don't know how that gets added into here. But thank you. I do have something else I want to ask about later. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Director Cook. We'll come back around for that for sure. Director Deschel?
Yeah, upon reflection, I think it may be more appropriate to pull this from here as I think about it and maybe flag this as a discussion item for a future matter, which is how do we incorporate our strategic plan into our financial directives, right? Why limit it to the small sub $1 million change orders as opposed to saying, if we're going to direct fiscal policy in line with the strategic plan, then those small change orders would be encompassed within that, right? So I think, it might be more appropriate to include that, greenhouse gas, carbon costs, things along those lines. As we think about fiscal policy, maybe we would just pull it out and request that, maybe we find room for a discussion item on incorporating strategy into financial decision making, worded in a much more artful way for the committee's discussion.
That's great. Thank you, Director Deschel. Well said. So given that we did have some discussion around that, I'm not seeing other directors' hands. Ms. Johnson, is there anything you wanted to comment on just along those lines and tying financials to strategic plan?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to opine. And considering Director Deschel's last comment, recognizing that one of our strategic priorities is financial success, I think that's interwoven in relationship to what it is collectively you as a board have talked about more specifically as you look at adopting, financial policies going forward. And I think that would be the most appropriate place in which to incorporate. Further to the point that was raised in the course of documents that we bring forward, we have qualified what strategic plan to which whatever action we're recommending for your consideration is tied to one of the strat plans and what we anticipate that outcome to be. So there already is nexus there, but I would round out with saying that it would be best suited with financial policies from my vantage point. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Yeah, I think Dr. Deschel, Ms. Johnson, thank you for the comments on that. That makes sense that can be a financial policy item as we consider future strategic plans and modifications thereof. And Dr. Deschel, good point about future discussion items potentially for this committee of how we ensure our financial and fiscal policies are indeed in line with our strategic plans as an agency. So moving forward, Director Cook, come back around to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I've just realized the 25% would be applied toward each contract amount. And I don't know how to say this, but the intent, and you wouldn't do this, but you wouldn't want to come in with a succession of contract amendments just underneath the 25% in it as a way to avoid having to take it to a board and doing that over and over and over and over. I mean, I know that's not your intent. Is there a way to express that within here somehow? That you wouldn't want to. The reason I'm so focused on this is from what Director Busick, Chair Busick brought up, that Allied contract was a small double digit, like 13 or $16 million amount. And then over the period of less than a decade, it burgeoned to 67 million. And I don't know, obviously we're excluding that. That's really good. But are there other areas where we might want otherwise to keep an eye on the costs and we wouldn't have a chance because the contract amendments kept coming in over and over at 25 or 24.5% or something like that? Is there a statement of intent or something that would guide that?
Ms. Snyder, is that something you might feel comfortable commenting on? Capturing intent?
I don't know.
Pardon me, I just realized I was on mute. Sorry about that. You know, I think it's challenging to add sort of a statement of intent that's a little bit squishy, if you will. We're trying to really nail down and have clear delegations of authority. If we were going to add language, we might be able to add some language around add language in about the cumulative impact. I think the intent of the language in there right now, as may be necessary from time to time not to exceed, it was meant to capture that idea that it could not exceed 25% of the original contract. But if we felt like we really needed to be clear, we could add, I guess we could add that additional word that the cumulative total would not exceed 25% of the original contract would be one option.
And is that a reasonable amount, the total of the sum of the amendments? I don't want to unnecessarily hamstring you either. Is 25% what you had thought when you were crafting that language?
Is that a question to me, Director Cook?
Yes.
So yes, and just to be clear, there were multiple folks involved in crafting this language, from our procurement team to Mr. McLeod and our chief administrative officer as well as Ms. Johnson. So yes, that was the intent, but we could certainly add that additional language if we felt like it had to be added. One other point of clarification, Mr. Chair, if I may, with respect to the Allied agreement. So I just want to be clear that that agreement, like other safety and security contracts, was always reviewed under that prior provision that didn't have any dollar limitations to it. It was considered an annual procurement for an operational good and service. So in any amount, although that agreement, Director Cook is correct, it did increase over time up to around $68 million. It was never brought to the board because it was within that sort of exception.
Thank you. Those comments. I think perhaps what we'll do, I'll finish out the comments and then we can discuss the amendment that we'll make and whether we'll have that language there or not. Director Deschelle?
Yeah, two comments. One, I think Director Cook, I envision the 25% language as I read it and as I read it in the context of the document, that it does cover that contract amount cumulatively, but I'm not opposed to greater specificity. I do have a question as to whether there was alternative fuels was intentionally left out of B2. I noticed electricity was in there, but there's also a myriad of other, hydrogen, biofuel, etc., which frankly, maybe there's other board members who think the procurement of those, if we had an alternative fuel vehicle, would need to come to the board. From my perspective, it doesn't. It's fuel, whether it's electricity or diesel or biogas. So just for hydrogen, just curious if that was intentional or not.
Director Deschelle, would you like someone to comment on the omission of that language and if there was intent there? Great. Ms. Johnson, is that something that you'd like to comment on?
Yes, most definitely. There was no intent behind that. It was a slight oversight because basically we need to ensure that we procure vehicles. Any type of vehicle procurement would come to this body.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
So to the extent General Counsel, you or others are open to it, I'd like to add in, in that list, vehicle fuel or alternative vehicle fuel is probably catches it all. But if anyone has better language, no pride in authorship over here. So.
Ms. Snyder, any concerns with modifying the language if and when we do that amendment here to be vehicle fuel? Any concerns on that?
So the suggestion would be to just have vehicle fuel instead of specifying diesel fuel or gasoline.
That works, or vehicle fuel, gasoline, or diesel, gasoline, or other vehicle fuel. I don't really care. I just want to make sure that if we do procure an alternative fuel vehicle, that we don't need to come back and amend this later. Right, that's the intent that I'm trying to get at. In the event we pursue not diesel, gas, or electric buses, which are out there in the world, that you can procure the fuel as well without the board having to.
If I may, Mr.
Ms. Johnson, I
Chair,
see you raise your hand. Yes, please.
thank you very kindly. This is straightforward. We can incorporate that to say, fuel for vehicles, I think would be all encompassing. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm comfortable with the 25% cumulative because that's the limit with which the GM CEO has authority to extend a contract. So anything beyond that would come back to the board. And so I'm very comfortable with that. And I think it captures the intent very, very well. So I'd be supportive if we wanted to add some clarifying language in an amendment to include that.
Thank you, Director Catlin. So I'm not seeing any other hands, and I think what we're arriving at is that we would amend this, and so we would move to amend and go through that vote first. I'm wondering if Director Cook, you might start us out by revisiting the two pieces that you were looking to change and maybe stating some suggested language, and Ms. Snyder, if you'd be willing to contribute and help frame that as Director Cook states that.
Sure. I'll move to amend item number 6 on packet page 6 to read contract amendments and change orders as may be necessary from time to time to cumulatively not exceed 25% of the original contract amount. And further on packet page 8, item number F, to modify the wording, the general manager shall provide a monthly report to the board, and posted on the website of the contracts executed during the previous month pursuant to this resolution. What I would say about that is I would be happy if general counsel looked at that and wanted to tweak or reword it just to capture that in a better way. I'd be very pleased with that between now and the final approval. So that would be my motion. If you'd like, I could make the motion also to include the wording in item B on packet page 6 regarding fuel for vehicles as opposed to diesel fuel, gasoline, and however that is better worded.
You wouldn't mind including that in the same amendment? I think that would be great.
Yeah, let's do that.
So thank you for restating that. It's Director Cook's suggestions as well as Director Deschel. Director Deschel, do you want to have any further comment on the amendment? Thank you very much. Ms. Snyder, I might ask just an assist here what the best way to restate some of this before taking the vote on the amendment. Should we state the language? Do we have the language captured?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we have the language captured, and if you'll allow me just, a tweak here or there to add, the placement of the language, but I think I have a good understanding of what the board is asking for, adding the cumulative language, adding the reference to the original contract, and adding or replacing the reference to vehicle fuel more broadly. So what I'd recommend is I will draft that language, but if we could just get a second on that motion, and then if there's any further discussion, I think we can move forward.
A second.
Second from, I see Director Deschel. So that's a motion by Director Cook, a second by Director Deschel. Any no votes to the amendment? Great. With that, the amendment passes unanimously with 7 yes and 0 no. We'll now move on, unless are there any further comments on the main recommended action? Wonderful. We had our mover and our second. I'll now ask, are there any no votes on the recommended action? Wonderful. The recommended action also passes unanimously, 7-4, 0 against. Thank you very much. Please go ahead and place your microphones on mute if you haven't already done so. We're going to move into our discussion items. We have 2 discussion items on the agenda this evening. The first is a refinancing of 2013 and 2014 certificates of participation, or COPs. I would ask Mr. Doug McLeod, once again, Chief Financial Officer, and Mr. Brendan Morgan, Senior Manager of Debt and Investments, to present any of the pertinent information that they have prepared this evening for this discussion item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Doug McLeod, and as the chair mentioned, Brendan Morgan, Senior Manager of Debt and Investments, is joining me, as well as Dee Weiser from the law firm Butler Snow. Dee Weiser is our principal bond counsel that we use for any bond or COP refinancings. And Dee is here to help answer any questions. We'll have a short presentation that Brendan will go through here shortly. Just as a reminder, last month we asked the board for an extension to Hilltop Securities financial advisor contract in anticipation of this refinancing. So now we are bringing the refinancing discussion item to the board to discuss what the staff intends to do, and so that we can begin the paperwork necessary to complete that refinancing. What you'll see in the next few slides is we have an opportunity to reduce RTD's annual debt service by a significant amount through interest savings. So without further ado, I will call up the presentation materials and ask Brendan to go ahead and walk us through those slides. So hopefully you can see my screen with a presentation on it.
Yeah, I can see it, Doug.
Fantastic. All right, Brendan,
All right,
please go ahead.
Thank you, Doug. Good evening. This is Brendan Morgan, Senior Manager of Debt and Investments. I apologize, Zoom is not recognizing my camera at the moment, so I won't be able, you all won't be able to see me speaking, but we'll walk you through these slides, and I'll add some additional color and some additional background that'll be helpful to collectively wrap our minds around this opportunity and this discussion. I will start by saying this is an interesting discussion item. It involves a refinancing or refunding a portion of RTD's existing debt for lower interest rates and locking in potentially over $100 million of savings over the next 22 years. I'll give you a little bit of history, talk a little bit about the savings, excuse me, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Fast Track's debt authorization from 2004. So as far as history goes here, we're looking at these 2013A and 2014A certificates of participation. The 2013s were issued to buy buses, all types of buses. There were Gilligs and MCIs, and those the big 60-foot articulated buses. Quite a bit of RTD's fleet was refreshed with these certificates of participation. It was a mix between base and fast tracks, and as of today, there's approximately $18 million worth of these obligations remaining for fast tracks to pay off, and approximately $90 million for base to still pay off. Now, the 2014A certificates of participation were issued to fund a portion of the capital for the project that became the N line. We currently have approximately $441 million outstanding on these certificates of participation. And both of them are callable next year, meaning RTD has the option to refinance, repay this old debt, and refund it with new debt. So there's this window of opportunity approaching that we can take advantage of. Excuse me. As far as the savings goes, the savings is fantastic. We looked at doing this a couple different ways. One being the way we traditionally come to the board and suggest these refunding opportunities, where we issue new certificates of participation to refund the old, more expensive, older certificates of participation. And the savings from a transaction like that today would lock in savings of approximately $103 million. We also looked at this from a perspective of trying to get some extra savings, some incremental savings on top of that $103 million. So we looked at using some certificates of participation, but then also using fast tracks bonds for the fast tracks portion, or a major part of this fast tracks portion of the certificates of participation. And through doing that, we're able to raise the savings that we can achieve up to approximately $120 million. So it's a $17 million increase in the savings that we can generate through this transaction. And of course, this is all in today's interest rate environment, so it's subject to change as interest rates change. The nice thing is, well, there's two things here. There's a trade-off. On one hand, we would consume the remaining fast tracks voter-approved debt authorization to do a transaction like this. But on the flip side, we would free up the ability to issue certificates of participation in the future for any fast tracks projects. The next slide here, I think Doug's going to pull this one up, talks a little bit about, here we go, our bond capacity. So as we all know, the voter authorization for fast tracks was given back in 2004. So that is 18 years ago. And the voters authorized these three bullet points that you see on this slide here. There was sort of a three-pronged limit to the debt that RTD could issue for fast tracks. And it included the $3.477 billion of principal that we could issue. As of today, we only have approximately $295 million left on that limit. Voters also authorized the $7.129 billion of principal and interest. So that's sort of the total repayment cost, if you will. If we look at it through that lens, RTD has approximately $576 million left. And that's the limit that we will bump into first in the situation that we're in currently. That will really be the limiting factor to what we can do. Then the final prong here was this $309.7 million maximum annual debt service. So that's the maximum we can pay in any given year as far as repaying the debt. So anything above and beyond that would require additional voter authority at some point in the future. The interesting thing here is we've been talking to our bond counsel about this, and we find ourselves in a situation where there's really limited to no legal precedent set to issue voter authorized debt beyond 20 years. So we're sort of coming up on this point in time where the 2004 debt authorization, I'm going to call it expires for lack of a better word. That's not a technical term, of course, but it's sort of expiring at this point in time. So we're in a position where we may have a chance to either use it or potentially lose the opportunity to use this voter authorization and the lower interest rates that come along with it. So moving on to the next slide here. Just really some considerations here and sort of a recap of all of this is, number one, we can generate an additional $17 million by structuring this transaction with fast tracks bonds, in addition to the certificates of participation. We do need to consider the fact that it would exhaust all of the remaining fast tracks bond authorization that we received from the voters back in 2007. However, that authorization is sort of reaching the end of its legal life, if you will. So there's that fact to take into consideration. And there's no current plans to use these bonds in the short term. Projects have not been identified in the short term where we would be issuing these bonds. Our midterm financial plan does not include any use or issuance of this debt at this point in time. So the savings, again, we're looking at $120 million. That's gross cash flow savings over 22 years. On a net present value basis, that would be $57 million or 11.4% of the current debt outstanding. The second to last bullet point here, just again, a reminder, this would sort of release our ability and give us back the ability to issue certificates of participation rather than bonds to fund future projects. And of course, we would probably be issuing these as green bonds, as the final bullet mentions. But we'll get back to that when we come back to the board at some point, looking for approval to proceed with some sort of refunding transaction in the next few months. So with that, I'll mention that, again, Dee Weiser, our bond counsel, is here. So if we have questions on Tabor, voter authorization, anything like that, Dee's subject matter expert on that, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions. And of course, Doug and I are here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Thank you, Mr. McLeod. I just would like to exercise a little bit of privilege. There's a significant policy decision here. So the first thing I want to do is just ask one question up front that I think will be important for directors here, and then frame, I think, the nature of the policy decision. So, Mr. Weiser, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I did ask a question offline, which is why I'd like to get this, out here, which is the nature of the 20-year mark on those bonds, as to whether or not that was as I understand, it's not statutory in nature. It is limited to no precedent that bonds would go beyond 20 years for a project like this. And I think we can all agree Fast Tracks is a little unprecedented. And not necessarily that it's statutory, and not necessarily that there is existing precedent for 20-year expiration. Mr. Weiser, would you mind just commenting on that before the board goes forward with discussion and questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I think you've described it accurately. This is not a statutory or constitutional concept. It's a legal principle announced by the Colorado Supreme Court and courts in other jurisdictions. And the real question is, at what point can you no longer issue bonds pursuant to voter authorization? The Colorado standard, and really adopted in other jurisdictions as well, is that, based upon the facts and circumstances, was the delay reasonable, prudent, or necessary? So not a very bright line, kind of squishy, but based upon our review of the case law in Colorado and elsewhere, we would feel comfortable going up to the 20-year mark. Beyond 20 years, it's more difficult for us to give an opinion that the bonds are validly issued absent additional judicial action.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser. So with that, I'll go to questions and comments from directors. I think a comment was made, and Mr. Morgan, thank you for framing it this way, but a comment was made, I think, along the lines of taking the temperature of the board. So the committee, at least, I'd love to hear from everybody at some point this evening. I think, if I understand correctly, aside from the decision as to whether to refinance or not, which Mr. Morgan, Mr. McLeod, I know, a slam dunk, awesome find again. But the marginal decision here is $57 million of net present value versus $47 million in net present value, $120 million gross versus $103 million gross in savings, in exchange for consuming the fast track bond capacity. So I think it's a pretty material policy. Thank you very much, Mr. McLeod and Mr. Morgan, for bringing that forward to the board. With that, I'll start going through the list here. Director Broom, you are up first.
Thank you, Chair. Is the savings spread out equally over the life of the bond issue?
Mr. Chair.
Please.
Thank you. And I'll ask Brendan to correct me if I'm wrong, but no, it would not be. It depends on the sale of those bonds and which tranches they're sold over. So it wouldn't be even, but it approximates on average $5 million in savings per year.
I guess the question really deals with annual budgeting. In other words, and excuse my voice, but sometimes you take your savings up front because you're short of money. And other times you take the savings on the end because it gives window dressing. It looks like you're saving more gross savings.
Correct. And Brendan, would you like to comment on that?
Yes.
Brendan, we've lost.
Mr. Morgan, I think we may have lost your audio.
So, Mr. Chair, I
may have lost him from the meeting. Yeah, please.
I can comment on that. Sure. Thank you. Yeah, and we did consider that. The savings are significantly lower. I don't remember what the amount was to take that savings up front. And given our current financial projections with midterm financial plan, and knowing that we would not extend the term of these existing COPs, so it'd still be over 22 years as opposed to, say, a 30-year issuance. Over those 22 years, we think that the benefit really comes from taking the most savings and spreading it out over those years rather than taking a lower amount up front.
Okay, it looks good to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Broom. Director Geisinger.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. My first question is for Mr. Weiser. As I understand it, the Colorado Supreme Court has said the question of whether the bonds can no longer be issued. I guess the term expired was being used. Was the delay reasonable, prudent, and necessary? Is there case law that then tied that to the 20 years, or where did that come from?
The 20-year case law. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, may I answer?
Oh, please, yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
In Colorado, there are 3 cases on this topic, and they've ranged from 3 to 7 years, and never has the court had a problem with that. But cases in other jurisdictions have gone as long as 20 years, and that's the basis of our conclusion. And of course, I think the chair talked about the complexity of fast tracks and all the things that have happened in terms of the Great Recession and construction costs going up and so forth. So we think on balance, the 20-year mark is a fair mark.
And I don't know if this is a question for you or Mr. McLeod, but is there, what's the downside of then relying on COPs as opposed to bonds? Are there limits? Are there, I think it's a higher interest rate, or what are the practical differences?
Mr. Chair.
Bob.
Sure. Thank you. Under current market conditions, the difference between a bond interest rate and a COP interest rate is approximately 50 basis points or 0.5% interest. So that's what accounts for the difference in the 103 million versus 120 million. So bonds are essentially cheaper to issue. With COPs, when you issue a COP, you have to have basically collateral, or you have to have an asset backing up that loan. It's really a lease purchase agreement. So in this case, the 2014 COPs are actually using the end line as collateral. So in the event of default, the bond holders will be able to claim, and I'm not speaking in legal terms, I know, but essentially the bondholders will be able to claim ownership of those assets. So what happens in a transaction such as this, if we do not issue COPs, it frees up the collateral of the end line to be used for future projects in which we could issue additional COPs to raise financing money, a little more expensive than bonds. Or if we refinance with COPs for the COPs, we would retain that collateral that would be locked up with our investors until those COPs are paid off. So there's a bit of a trade-off in terms of collateral, but I think the important point to realize is that it doesn't eliminate RTD's borrowing capacity, cash flows notwithstanding, in order to afford that, but COPs essentially don't fall under some of the taper limitations. It would really fall under our ability to repay them. I hope that answers the question. And Dee, I'd refer to you if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I guess the way I've thought about it is that since we think the authorization may well become stale and not be capable of being used to issue sales tax bonds pursuant to the fast tracks question in 2024, why not issue those bonds now, take the interest rate savings now, and recognize, as Doug said, you have other financial tools available should you have a revenue stream and a project that would require further long-term indebtedness.
Okay, I guess I have.
Thank you very much, Director Geisinger.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Several things to think through. And one issue is that, this is giving up our bonding capacity on a very politically charged issue. And I'm just concerned that that's a piece, since it's not statutory 20-year limit. I mean, I can see what you're saying, that the precedent is looking at shorter terms. Fast tracks is sort of a different animal. But the 20 years is not something we can point to and say that those are going to expire. I do have some concerns around this, but I'll think this through and potentially come back. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Geisinger. Director Deschel.
Yeah, I have a few questions along similar lines as Director Geisinger, which is that I understand there's case law saying that a shorter term bond is still valid. Is there case law stating that a longer term bond is invalid?
Mr. Chair.
Please, Mr. Weiser.
There is case law in other jurisdictions that has said that 19 years in that particular instance was a valid bond issuance. There are some cases in other jurisdictions where courts have had trouble and have invalidated an election. Some of those are unique in that they were sort of single purpose projects. And so again, it's sort of this facts and circumstances test and whether the delay is reasonable, necessary, and prudent.
And on the bonds, I understand it would take away, if we did it today, if we did it next year, if we did it in 2024, we would be eating up the rest of our capacity to issue more bonds. Is the interest market, this might be more for Mr. McLeod, but I understand we're also in a time of sort of historic interest rates with the Fed putting their thumb on the scale to push those back up. I know there's some relationship there between bonds and interest rates, but is now also the most advantageous time, even if we issue the bonds and hold the cash, is this sort of a do it now because of the interest rate market? Is that on the bond side? Is there a disadvantage to waiting other than the unknown?
Mr. Chair, I would ask Mr. Morgan to respond, please.
Yeah, please, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Morgan, you're on mute.
Is that better? Are you able to hear me now?
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Great. Great. So if I understood the question correctly, I think the question was, could we go ahead and issue the bonds today and sit on that cash for some period of time? And I think Dee may be better suited to talk to that. But generally speaking, there needs to be a project. There are some rules around the use of proceeds in a timely fashion. And there are some challenges around doing something like that. So perhaps Dee would want to chime in on that a little bit.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Mr. Morgan.
Under federal tax law, to issue tax exempt obligations, the district has to have a reasonable expectation when bonds are issued, or COPs for that matter, that 85% of the proceeds will be spent within 3 years. So there is that test applies. And so the notion of issuing bonds now in a low interest rate environment as a hedge against and as an opportunity to build some project in the future is probably a limited opportunity.
Mr. Chair, I have one final question.
Go ahead, Director Deschel. Thank you.
Yeah. So we saw a lot about how this would create savings for us, but it also, unless I misunderstood the slide, stated that we were already at our annual debt service limit. So I'm having trouble sort of squaring those two in my mind. What would this do to our annual debt service payments net? Are they going up or are they going down?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. McLeod or Mr. Morgan? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what would this do to our annual debt service? The answer is this would lower our annual debt service by approximately $5 million give or take, every year for the next 22 years. That's the way we structured it in this current analysis that we generated this $103 million or $120 million savings.
So does that mean as of today, we are over what our annual debt service limit should be? Or am I misunderstanding that slide?
Morgan? Mr. Morgan, would you like to comment on that? Oh, I think we lost Mr. Morgan. Yeah, Mr. McLeod.
Sure, thank you. Our annual debt service, including certificates of participation right now, so it includes some numbers that probably wouldn't apply. However, our annual debt service is currently approximately $260 million per year. And if you look out every year, it's between 260 and 300 million. So we would still fall, and that includes COPS. So we would still fall within the $309 million limitations on an annual debt service basis. So we would be fine with this issuance.
Yeah, I think I'm connected to Director Geisler's point. I think something that's on my mind, which is even if we used every bonding capacity we could to get savings, to get more money, fast track as approved by the voters, the money's not there. There is no more debt. Even if we had an extra $100 million a year, right? We can't even issue that much bond money to finish out these projects.
Right, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, please.
And I think that's a great point. The other risk that we run is interest rate risks. So the further we go out, the amount that we could borrow actually decreases, because as interest rates rise, we have still a cap on the ability to repay a certain amount. So you can imagine higher interest rates means we can borrow less upfront. So let's say interest rates rise over the approximately 2 more years we have until the 20-year mark. It actually would decrease our ability to borrow. And the opposite would be true if interest rates decrease, but they're essentially at historical lows still right now.
All right. I think lots to think about here on this decision. All for savings, but there's a lot of other pieces at play.
Thank you, Director Giselle. Great questions. Director Catlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that, or clarify that the N-line which is a fast tracks project, was financed using COPs. And so we would still have, it would not be shutting the door on opportunities for fast tracks using COPs in the future if we were to take advantage of the interest savings, the 120 million by refinancing with the bonds. So I just wanted to point that out, that the N-line was in fact not funded with fast tracks bond, or it may have been funded in part, I don't know, but the majority of the funding was COPs. So I know that it is a politically sensitive or charged issue, but this would, if we were to go the bond route, this would not close the door on leveraging future COPs for completing any fast track projects. Am I right on that?
Yes, correct.
Seeing the head nods. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Catlin. Good point. Director Cook?
Yeah, kind of a follow-on question to some of this. So let's say Front Range Rail garners Amtrak money, and we want to play along because we want to use the infrastructure they're building or the whatnot in order to provide some service in the Northwest Corridor. Is there a difference? Would we be able to use bond money specifically authorized for fast tracks to participate in that if they're, if the next 2 years is a reasonable time frame versus, COPs? Is there any limitation on the use of COPs to participate, since we wouldn't own the infrastructure, I assume? So that's a question for, I'm not sure if it's D or whoever.
Mr. Chair, I could take a run at that.
Yeah.
I think,
thank you, Mr. Weiser.
Yeah, I think it would not limit your ability. We might, as I think it was Doug referenced, might in fact at that moment, if that opportunity came to pass, use the end line as the collateral, or parts of the end line as collateral for project in the Northwest Corridor if we couldn't use the Northwest Corridor as the asset.
Okay. And then second thing is Doug McLeod, you said debt service savings for bond issuance is 5 million. How much would be the debt service savings for CLPs?
Thank you. Just real quickly. So 103 million, this is on average, 103 million divided by $750,000 less per year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cook. Director Broom.
Thanks for giving me a second bite at the apple. It's been 12 years since I've been involved in this stuff closely, but is this a current refunding or an advance refunding?
Brendan.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yes,
at this point in time, this would be an advance refunding. The call date is not until June of 2023 for both of these certificates.
And Mr. Chair, if I could add, one of the reasons why we're bringing it to you at this point in time is Brendan has been monitoring this for probably well over a year, but we do have the negative arbitrage impact of when we issue this, because it's an advance refunding, we essentially have 2 outstanding issuances that we're paying interest on. So every month that we've waited to bring this to the board has saved us additional funding by not having 2 outstanding issuances out there. Approximately, I believe we looked at it at one point, Brendan, we've saved approximately $1 million a month, somewhere in that neighborhood.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, Director Broom?
Thank you very much.
Great, yeah. Director Shell.
All right. I think this is my last bite here, but a bond is going to meet the COPs we're not, because we can't secured by revenue from our sales tax, but these bonds would be secured by revenue. And as it stands today, Fast Tracks does not pay for itself. So we would essentially be, by issuing these bonds, while we'd be realizing an extra $750,000 in savings, we would be, in order to make the math work, we would in essence have to be borrowing even more money from the base system to fund Fast Tracks to realize an extra $750,000 in savings. And that's another sort of political, it's net savings all around, but I'm trying to square those 2 things, recognizing that Fast Tracks already doesn't pay for itself, but we already take away bus service from the base system to fund Fast Tracks projects. And would this really be, even with the savings, wouldn't we still be spending more base money on Fast Tracks by doing this?
Yes, correct. That's true. So yeah, over the longer term, the base ends up picking up more of the tab for Fast Tracks. In 2024, the base system's bonds are paid off. So that frees up quite a bit of cash flow and reduces their debt service. So the idea was that Fast Track's debt service starts increasing that point because we start paying more towards principal. So yeah, the base system is essentially subsidizing Fast Tracks to a certain extent. So the less expenditures that Fast Tracks has, the less subsidization that needs to occur from the base system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Deschelle. Director Broom, I see your hand up. Was there another comment you wanted to make?
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. Seeing no more hands, I did have a few more questions, and while I asked those questions, I wondered if, given the nature of this and strategic decision here, if Ms. Johnson would like to comment on implications and strategy around some of the things that have come up. But before doing that, I'll just ask a few questions. So the idea of potentially using COPS, and I know we're talking a lot about the B line here, but there are other unfinished Fast Tracks projects, as we're aware, one of which being the completion, of course, of the end line and then our extension. But the COPS are fundamentally more expensive. So I guess just with that in mind, this may be a little bit on the spot, and perhaps you want to answer this offline. but what approximately could we raise in terms of end line collateral for use on other fast tracks projects if we were to do that in the future? Do we have an idea of what that might be? Is that essentially equivalent to where we're at now with the COPS, but presumably at a higher interest rate? Or is that a higher number? If Mr. McLeod, you might be able to comment, or perhaps Mr. Morgan or even Mr. Weiser.
Sure, great question. I'll ask Brendan and Dee to supplement my comments, but the initial COP issuance was based on a value of approximately 440 million, I believe, for the end line. So that was unencumbered. Those were unencumbered assets. So there was no federal funding. So we had to specifically identify those assets to use for collateral. So at the time in 2014, it was determined that those were worth approximately 440 million. I think I'd ask Dee and Brendan to comment on that. That if we were to look at that in the current sense, we'd have to go back and revalue those assets if we were to use those for collateral for a future COP issuance. Dee, Brendan?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please.
I think in the capital markets, in the municipal marketplace, the marketplace doesn't tend to require an appraisal and tends to look more at the use of the asset. And this is a pretty essential asset from the district's mission. And so I don't think it's a dollar for dollar. And based upon what I see elsewhere in the marketplace, I imagine you could probably borrow more than the 440 million if you went into the capital markets today.
Understood. Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Weiser, I think this is a question for you, and I think this is one for follow-up, perhaps for board consideration if and when this comes to recommended action, particularly for the marginal change. But you've mentioned some of the case law in other jurisdictions, which does run into, I believe you mentioned 19 years. Wondering if perhaps some of that, those instances or examples could be provided to the board, or perhaps you even want to comment on the nature of the jurisdiction or project at this point in time, but also happy to have you take that to follow up.
I think that's probably best dealt with as a follow-up item, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. And we don't need to make an exhaustive thing of it. I know that noted a number of questions regarding that. And a question perhaps for Mr. McLeod, perhaps for others, the construction of the end line and the use of the COPS. I know, Mr. Morgan, you commented on that and just where we were at that time. Would you mind just elaborating or expounding upon the decision to not use the bonds at that point in time for end line? I know you did touch upon that, but I think one could look at this and say, we're actually utilizing the intent of these bonds by moving this over and ensuring actually that we're using it and mitigating risk. But at some point we had made the decision not to use that, and perhaps, the 20 years wasn't apparent, or I just, maybe some of the thought process that went into the COPS versus the bonds, I think would also be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's a great question to point out that at the time in 2014, what we had determined was that although COPS at the time were still a little bit more expensive than bonds, what we wanted to do was save that taper capacity on the bonds for additional projects, and recognizing we finally had an asset that was sizable. So when we looked at collateral from other assets throughout the district, we have so much federal funding and other types of funding tied to so many of these other assets. We really only had a small pool of assets to choose from, and some of those were properties that had values of approximately $10 to $15 million. There was not enough really there to fund as collateral, finance enough funds to build any project of any significance. So in order to preserve that taper capacity that was shown on that slide, at that point in time, it was determined, hey, let's use COPS since we have some collateral, gives us some flexibility in the future, knowing that we could also still refinance like we're talking about now with bonds at some point in time and replace those COPS once the call provision was up and save interest savings. So we tried to build in a lot of flexibility in our financing going forward to maintain that taper capacity within our cash flows. And also with an eye towards the future of hopefully if interest rates decrease, we would take advantage of those to refinance and generate additional savings. And Brendan, sorry I answered the question. I thought you disappeared on us there. So anything to add?
No, nothing else to add, Doug. I think you nailed it.
Great. Thank you for commenting on that. And first of all, I did want to ask Ms. Johnson if you wanted to comment on this marginal difference. But I did just want to point out Mr. Morgan, Mr. McLeod, really, we got some smart minds here working on this and identifying some good opportunities. We have a debt service issue, and as we've talked about, are in an unprecedented situation. So I realize there's a sticky issue here between the marginal between the 103 and 120. But good news, we found at least 103 here, and just really commend the innovation and discipline in watching this and waiting and being patient for the right moment. So I'd be remiss if I didn't just say, thank you for that and for bringing this forward. And with that, Ms. Johnson, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear just your comments, in particular as it relates to some of the board concerns, which I certainly share, of that marginal difference going from the 103 gross to the 120 using bonds.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to opine. And I want to recognize the great discussion the board has had around this issue, and also commend Mr. Morgan and Mr. McLeod, because when we first met about this issue, they were educating me, and quite naturally a lot of the conversation that has ensued we had as well. Recognizing you put forth the element of the strategic plan, I would be remiss to say once again, as we look at our financial success priority, that's paramount when we look at where we are currently and where we're trying to go, and to maximize taxpayer dollars for the betterment of the agency. So recognizing that is the basic foundation, that was prevalent for me in relationship to how I viewed this and the discussion that has been had tonight relative to certificates of participation. I believe that as a body, I would encourage you all to have further discussion, recognizing this is a policy matter, but relative to looking at the strategic plan, we want to optimize the dollars in the most efficient manner as possible. And so quite naturally, in reference to what Mr. McLeod and Mr. Morgan have put forward in support from Mr. Weiser, as we look at the certificates of participation, overarchingly, that is something that we are leaning towards. So that's how I would round out that discussion, but quite naturally interested in listening to other aspects of the board relative to direction in which you may want to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And I'm just going to circle back because I know that the idea here was to try to get a sense of where staff time should go and get an idea of where we want to go. But we're not at a vote here, and I want to avoid any kind of misconception or perception of a vote. But I did just wonder if other directors want to make some comments, and we could do that going around the horn quickly. I'm happy to just share my thoughts. I've tried to keep this to questions. I am concerned about the using of the the bond capacity and authorization on what is a fairly charged view, and less so from the fact that it's politically charged, for example, and more just what that could actually lead to in terms of if we use this capacity and other opportunities arise. Director Cook alluded to the Amtrak possibility with Front Range Passenger Rail, which I know we all know is a long ways off. That actually this could trigger other discussions. There's an inherent risk that comes along with this. Certainly, the political environment, everyone's very concerned with our ability to complete fast tracks and deliver on that. And so we are making a trade. We're definitely making a trade and saying we're going to take more savings in exchange for eating up that bond capacity. And I think we're sending a signal and making a decision about that we wouldn't be using those bonds on fast tracks. I don't necessarily think that's wrong. I think there's definitely a concern there, and it's why I think looking at that case law would be particularly interesting, because I do think that this is a fairly unprecedented project, and in reading the fast tracks vote and then what passed, there was a clear intent that it was completing these projects. We are where we are. I want to throw that out there that to me, I look at this as there is some amount of risk coming with $17 million gross. 103 slam dunk, no question. I think the real question remaining is the $17 million worth the additional risk of foregoing that bond capacity and not necessarily knowing what we might be able to do with COPS. So if I'm just being open, I feel a little uncomfortable not quite knowing, and I know that none of us have a crystal ball. We can't know how this would play out with the bond authorization. We can't know what's going to happen with interest rates, although I think we all appreciate we're at historic lows. So I just wanted to point out that to me there is a substantial risk here in the trade for 17. So with that, I'll put this out there and open it up to the floor to see directors. I see hands coming up if you want to comment at where your head's at here to give some indication to staff. Director Geisinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I'll start by saying, I think you put that all very well. I also would like to see the case law, and it sounds, I appreciate Mr. Weiser's good counsel that it's very up in the air. I agree with the question that you mentioned that Director Cook asked. We're kicking off this Front Range Passenger Rail District. We want to be a part of that. We want to be. There's a lot of potential, public downside to this, I think, or at least risk for that marginal 17 million. And I join in saying that finding this money is a great thing, the 103, the 120, it's a really great thing. But I just have concerns about along the same lines as Director Davidson was commenting about using up all of our bond authority at this point with Front Range Passenger Rail and Amtrak coming on. So thank you. And I just want to say one more thing is that I appreciate the way this came to us, is that coming to us as a discussion item. I think that's our hope with these smaller committees, that we can discuss these policy issues. My hope is soon that we will be sitting around a table and doing that. But rather than coming to us with an action, recommended action or something, I appreciate you bringing it this way. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Geisinger. Director Deschel.
I echo everyone's sentiments. Thank you for finding these. I think, another thing, and I apologize to the attorneys at Butler Snow, but another thing that I'm, or maybe our own legal bill, but another thing that I'm sort of thinking through is that, as far as I understand, if a pre-Tabor authorization was made, that's still valid. But somehow a bond that was authorized post-Tabor has a 20-year stale, and COPs that were on. So I'm having, and it doesn't need to be answered now, but I'm having trouble sort of squaring that in my mind.
Mr. Chair, could I respond to that?
Yeah, please do. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think there's any, maybe I misunderstand, but I don't think there's a pre-Tabor authorization that remains valid. If this legal principle, in fact, first arose in Colorado in about 1933, way before Tabor's adoption. And so this is not a Tabor question. It's really this independent question of when debt authorization becomes stale.
Okay, well, that makes that part easier. I think on the other piece, on the one hand, if we exercise the bond, we are having the base system continue to further subsidize fast tracks. On the other hand, it's it happens all the time. It happens all the time. It happens today, and $17 million is a lot of money. It is a lot of drivers, a lot of operators, mechanics, a lot of frontline staff to sort of, I probably hear that I'm sort of caught in a tension between how much are we subsidizing, but on the other hand, is that politics getting in the way of sound fiscal decisions? Just purely economic choices and management of the system. And if I look back 5, 10, 15 years and say, well, no, I voted to say no to $17 million because I was concerned about the political implications, what does that mean? And I think on the other side of things, political implications are real. I only imagine the amount of staff time we've dedicated to political implications and the soft costs that are real there, and the hard costs that are real there. And I think the benefit of exercising the bonds is we get the upside of the money. We, from what I understand, have 3 years to allocate it. If we wait for 2 years, we may not save any money by issuing those bonds and maybe left just assuming more debt. And I'm much more concerned with assuming more debt in the future that's not going to end up as an interest savings than I am about the political backlash today. So I think everyone here is in agreement that we can't take on more debt, and is waiting 2 years going to effectively mean that. We know today we can have interest savings. I don't know in 2 years if that's going to continue to be true. So those are sort of the things that I'm sitting with and thinking through.
Thank you, Director Shishel. I just react and say we're certainly I think you characterized that well. We're choosing between some unknowns. And I would say, I would, great comments. Let's not vote based on political concerns, but I think we want to measure out, potential risk that come with those concerns in terms of, what money's been put into fast tracks and what, communities are thinking about in terms of what could and should and would have been delivered from fast track. So less so, what everybody thinks or says, and just, more so what could, again, you characterize that well. We're thinking through a lot of could be's, what could fall out of, that discussion. So thank you for the comments. And Director Busick, thank you for joining us on the committee today. I'll give you a call on you next.
Thanks, and I'll be very brief. I just want to say that I concur with comments made by you and by Director Geisinger and the concerns that you raised as well. I share those as well. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you for all the comments, and thank you for the discussion. I just would echo some of the sentiments here. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss this as a policy item. I really appreciate how well this is framed and explained, and the trade-offs, and just the clarity of discussion. It just was awesome. So thank you very much. Mr. McLeod and Ms. Johnson, I'm going to kind of look to you because I know that what you're trying to get a sense for is what to do with staff time. I certainly have my thoughts about how we might be able to, I don't want to go down rabbit trails of creating 3 scenarios here. I certainly hear the sentiment. I don't want to overspeak for the directors that, 103 slam dunk. I hear that there's some concern. I don't know that this is putting together 2 scenarios. I don't know that this is some additional follow-up and a special meeting in there. I don't want to miss the window of opportunity. I heard June thrown out there. But Mr. McLeod, Ms. Johnson, I know you're kind of looking for a sense of how to allocate staff time. Wondering if you could comment on if you have what you think you need and what you might recommend as next steps based on the discussion.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I think it would be prudent for us to convene as staff to basically digest all the comments that were received this evening and basically put forward a prudent course of action. Perhaps that could be done electronically via board memorandum or something of the like. I would ask Mr. McLeod and Mr. Morgan to add any additional thoughts. This is collective. You guys are the subject matter experts and want to ensure that you have an opportunity to say whether or not that's feasible. So please.
Thank you, General Manager Johnson. Yeah, and I think that's a great course of action. It'll also give us a little bit of time to put together some of the requested items, such as the case law, gather some additional information to provide to the board. So that sounds great to me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. We look forward to that. Thank you very much. I just continue to be impressed by the finance team here and the thoughtfulness in this. And thank you to the directors as well for the discussion around this. Yeah, Mr. McLeod.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Brendan probably wants to talk about timing a little bit too, just in terms of putting together paperwork, just so we can give a sense of expectations and, what we're looking at in terms of getting this deal put together. Brendan, please.
Yeah, absolutely. If I may, Mr. Chair. As far as timing goes, there's quite a stack of documents that goes into a bond resolution or a certificate of participation resolution. It takes quite a long time to pull that together. We schedule meetings with the rating agencies, et cetera. So we'd be looking at I always like to say about 3 months, 3-month runway to pull all the documentation together. So at the earliest, I think we'd be coming back to the board with a resolution and asking for approval of whatever direction we are recommending we go at that point in time. We're thinking we all want to go at that point in time. It would be in June. And in the meantime, as Doug mentioned, we'll certainly pull together the case law and everything else that will be helpful.
Thank you very much. I recognize that we created a little bit of work here today, so it's important for us to consider and think through, but I know we're certainly mindful of the fact that we have some additional requests, and thank you for being willing to help with that. Wonderful. Any further discussion on this matter? All right. Thanks, team. We've got a second discussion item on the agenda this evening. We are going to be talking about the system-wide fair study and equity analysis. This will be, I believe, Mr. Bill Van Meter, Assistant General Manager of Planning, and Mr. Chris Quinn, Planning Project Manager, to present information regarding this discussion item. So with that, I'll hand it over to you two gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Davidson and board members. This is Bill Van Meter, Assistant General Manager for Planning, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity this evening to introduce this item and to introduce the RTD project management team for the reference study for the system-wide fair study and equity analysis. Joining us tonight, as you mentioned, Chair Davidson, is Chris Quinn, who is the project manager. Also have Carl Green, who is the deputy project manager for the project. He's also in attendance tonight and Chris and Carl will be collaborating and providing you with tonight's presentation. I would also like to recognize Bill Soroy, Senior Manager of Transit-Oriented Communities, who's in attendance, also in support of this topic. Enough supporters. I support this project, and I would like to ask Chris and Carl at this point to proceed with the presentation and provide you with that overview of the system-wide fair study and equity analysis.
Good evening, board members. I will begin the presentation and then I'll be handing it off to Carl at a couple of different points throughout the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen with the presentation, so give me just a moment to pull that up. Okay. Is that showing?
It is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just as an overview of what we would like to discuss tonight with you is introduce you to the consultant team, go over the project goals and scope, and then discuss the communications and outreach plan along with the project schedule. So starting out with the consultant team, the lead consultant on this is 49 Technologies. They have worked on previous fair studies for RTD, so we're very happy to have them on board in that they have a pretty profound understanding of how RTD's financial and fair structure already works. So they've been able to hit the ground running. So we're very pleased that we don't really have to deal with any kind of learning curves with the consultants. But if you look at this slide, you'll notice that of the specialized expertise activities that we have shown on here, the middle box, which includes community engagement and facilitation, that is the largest of the boxes. We have the most consultants, individual consultants within that. And the reason for that, and we'll talk about this quite a bit more throughout the presentation, is we really want this study to be a customer community driven process. So we are intent on having a very rich public outreach effort as part of this process. And now as we move into the project scope and goals, I'm going to turn it over to Carl to go over the next couple of slides.
Thank you, Chris. So for these next couple of slides, the first one here, I'll be going over the technical milestones as it relates to the system-wide fair study and equity analysis project. So first off, we have establishing our goals, which I'll cover down next slide on the next slide. From there, our consultants are reviewing our fare structure as well as our Title VI program, specifically with relation to the Title VI program, is assessing our policies in relations to how we are analyzing any potential impacts. Additionally, there's the public participation plan for the inclusive decision-making framework, as well as our language access plan to ensure that we're providing meaningful access to our non-native English speakers throughout this project. From there, the consultants will be reviewing other transit agencies' fare structures. Specifically, there are 3 bulleted items, as we are all aware that RTD is unique in its kind as far as its geographic boundaries and the scale of our service district. And in addition to that, the range of services that we provide throughout our service district. So specifically around looking at or assessing different transportation properties, we'll be looking at benchmarking across 10 different transit properties. And the goal here is to compare RTD's fare pricing levels as well as fare related performance metrics in relation to these 10 different transit agencies. From there, we'll be looking at moving with case studies, where we will essentially have detailed case studies on transit properties who have undergone fare simplification and or have undertaken initiatives to improve their fare affordability. In that last bullet point, COVID-19 recovery strategies, the ultimate goal here is to look at transit properties who have responded to the changes in travel patterns and concerns about affordability. From there, we'll be looking at identifying fare alternatives, which will be well-informed by our robust community engagement process. Next step is to be able to develop an evaluation methodology to ensure that we are looking at our fare structure and analyzing data with respect to our fare structure. From there, we'll be looking at evaluating alternatives and conducting a preliminary Title VI analysis to ensure that we are meeting the mark with respect to Title VI. Once that is complete, we'll be moving forward with a recommendation to the board, and then simultaneously and certainly not least is preparing a final report and a Title VI analysis to be presented to the board. As you will note, Title VI is embedded throughout the technical milestones in congruence with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in addition, so we meet the requirement and are in compliance with the Federal Transit Administration by virtue of us receiving federal financial assistance. We need to ensure that we are in compliance with Title VI. So a primary focus of the fare study and equity analysis will be centered on Title VI protected populations, i.e. making sure that our community engagement is representative of those populations, and that we make sure that we do not adversely impact these populations by virtue of moving forward with any potential fare structure changes and any modifications to our past programs. Next slide. So as I mentioned previously in bullet point 1, we have established some fare study goals. This has dated back to our initial community engagement, or these fare study goals have been informed by initial community engagement that took place last summer, whether that be through our telephone town halls, our customer feedback panels, and other engagement opportunities. So as staff came together, we are moving forward with 3 goals that will drive the fare study and equity analysis project. The first goal is equity, which supports transit reliant, financially burdened customers and provides equitable and fair access to fares, products, and discounts, regardless of race, color, national origin, income status, or other marginalized communities. Our second goal is affordability, which is aligned with the value of services received. And the last goal is simplicity, where it's easy to understand with standardized discounts and streamlined fare payment options. Next slide. So next I'll be going over the communication engagement plan. As Chris mentioned earlier, you can go next slide, please. As Chris mentioned earlier, this is going to be a robust community engagement where it's customer driven and community focused. As far as the milestones within our engagement strategies, there's 4 milestones specifically. The first one is, the first engagement strategy is looking at the existing fare structure. So what we're going to be doing here at the latter part of March, early April, is moving forward with a survey and our initial community meetings where we're meeting directly with our community and our customers to identify challenges, pain points, areas of improvement, and what's working well. From there, we'll be receiving some initial fare structure preferences, which will then get into engagement number 2, which is looking at conceptual options. So given that we received this initial feedback, it'll inform where the direction that we are looking at going by providing these conceptual options of our fare structure alternatives. We will be educating and informing our community and stakeholders on the alternative trade-offs, and then we'll be sharing the initial feedback throughout this process. The next line is the engagement number 3, where we're moving forward with the fare alternatives. This is where we're getting at the crux of our engagement with our community and our customers by evaluating and identifying the trade-offs in relation to our 3 goals: equity, affordability, and simplicity. And the last item is moving forward with a formal public comment and hearing process. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that to help inform and support our overall engagement process is we are moving forward with the first of its kind at RTD of a multicultural outreach and engagement services, where we're directly working with community-based organizations that directly serve these marginalized and underrepresented communities. We want to make sure that these voices are elevated and that this process is inclusive to ensure that we are hearing their pain points specifically. In addition to that, that this whole process is inclusive of all customer segments. With that being said, I'll now turn it over to Chris.
So as we move forward with the engagement process, we're looking at what we're kind of labeling as our target audiences, and those include our customers. And by customers, we want to make sure that we're including even our former customers, non-customers. We also want to include the community, so social service organizations, transportation advocacy groups, and the multicultural community groups and organizations. By stakeholders, we're referring to the counties, cities, local jurisdictions, advocacy groups, as well as representatives from employment centers. And then built in already, we have our own internal advisory groups. Those include the Citizens Advisory Committee, our Accessoride Advisory Committee, as well as our Advisory Committee for People with Disabilities. And then also very importantly, our internal audiences. Besides the board, the GM, CEO, other employees, especially the frontline employees like our bus operators, fare inspectors, street supervisors, the ones who have to enforce the fares. What are the things that are working for them now? What is not working? And with the alternatives that we come up with, what do they think of those, so that we really know how it will work from an enforceability standpoint. And then as far as our customer community outreach milestones, Carl went over what those major milestones were. We'll talk a little bit more about the complete schedule in just a moment, but I want to just kind of focus on upcoming, how they fit within the overall parameters or the whole overall framework of the study. So later this month, we intend to launch our website. We want to have that up and running probably by the last week of March. In the April timeframe, we will be sending out a survey. And then along with that, the various milestones that Carl spoke of, the feedback on current fare structure, conceptual development of the conceptual options, as well as the fare alternatives. We'll start those efforts with community meetings beginning in April. And the intent is those will run through the fall, probably the September, October timeframe. Formal comment period, we would expect to be January, February of next year. And then we would be seeking board approval of the new fare structure in the April of 2023 timeframe. And we'll go over a little bit more detail on the schedule in just a moment. One of the unique things about this study, and at RTD, we've never really done a study in this way. One of the unique things that we are proposing or will be establishing is feedback panels. We intend to have 3 feedback panels so that we can weigh our options, discuss different options after we've had each one of the sets of community meetings at the various milestones that Carl spoke of. One of the unique one in this case is going to be the equity feedback panel. And our intention for the composition of that panel will be Black, Indigenous people of color, those with limited English proficiency, the refugee immigrant communities, low-income groups, those that are houseless, youth, seniors, people with disabilities, along with lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and queer populations. So as Carl noted, we really want to elevate the voices of those communities that may have been marginalized and who may have been left out of previous processes when we were going over these type of studies. Our second group would be a past program feedback panel, and that would include employers, colleges for the EcoPass, neighborhoods for the NecoPass. And then we also want to reach out to those groups, those colleges that aren't participating, and get their input as well, find out why, what it might take for them to participate in the past program groups. Also want to engage the nonprofit community, since we do have a relationship with them in terms of providing discount, or have provided them with discount fares in the past, find out what their needs are as well. And then lastly, employment centers and partnerships. The third group would be the jurisdictional feedback panel. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Local governments, state governments, DRCOG, as well as the transportation management organizations and associations throughout the district. For the schedule, I'd like to focus on the kind of the gray box that's at the bottom. One of the things to take note of is you'll notice that in April, that's when we will be beginning our public outreach. And even before we talk to any of the feedback panels, all of our feedback panel meetings are preceded by community outreach meetings. So the intent is we would gather information from the communities before going to the feedback panels. So kind of as almost a top down or maybe bottom up, starting with the general public, move up to our feedback panels, and then take the information that we have and process that to get to the next step. One of the things you may notice about this schedule is there are quite a few activities and they're packed into a pretty tight time frame. So why is the process taking so long? Well, with the robust public outreach that we're including as part of this, and to ensure that we really are able to solicit and analyze the information and the feedback that we get from the public, this will put the schedule into early next year. So we wouldn't anticipate getting or seeking board approval until about the April timeframe, which may be a little bit longer than had originally been anticipated. But again, in order to accommodate what we really believe needs to be done for our public outreach, we figured this was the most realistic schedule. Just a couple of other things, as I mentioned earlier, we do intend to have the website up and running by the end of this month, and then we'll be starting a survey in April. And then just focusing just a little bit more on the upcoming activities. As I said, we're starting the public involvement activities this next month. And at those meetings, we want to start obtaining existing fare structure input. What are the things what are the pain points? What are the things people do like, don't like about the existing fare structure? And then we will also be putting together the composition of the feedback panels. So as we talked about earlier, the equity panel, or excuse me, the feedback committee, or sorry, feedback panel, our equity, past program, and jurisdictional groups. We will also be conducting a review of our existing fare structure. As Carl mentioned, then we'll be comparing that to other transit agencies. And then we'll also be doing a review of the Title VI program. And then lastly, we'll be assessing our own structure, past programs as part of the equity analysis of those efforts. So I think that is all we have, and certainly open for any questions that the board may have on this process.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Quinn and Mr. Green. Awesome presentation, very helpful, very thorough. open up the floor for questions and discussion. I see Director Rivera Malpiedi. Thank you for joining the committee meeting tonight. I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I have a question about your equity panels. One of the things that I'm very concerned about is the fact that the largest employers are small businesses. It's well over 1 million employees they represent. It might be 1 or 2 or 5 or 10, but clearly under 100 and somewhere under 50. Can you include them in some of your panel discussions in terms of equity as well?
Yeah, and I'm going to actually defer to Carl on that one to see if he has any more comments or can provide additional information beyond what my just off the cuff yes would be.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, please, Mr. Green.
Yeah, so as far as the equity feedback panel goes, we're specifically looking at customers and community-based organizations that serve these communities. But another approach that we are also tapping into is working directly with Black Chamber of Commerce, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and the Asian Chamber of Commerce to be able to get a better understanding of these smaller types of employers, to be able to direct them to the equity feedback panel. So that is built into our approach of being able to solicit and garner interest from folks in those communities to provide their direct feedback with relation to the types of past programs that they may have.
Okay, thank you. I would just ask that besides those chambers, which are all phenomenal, there is a Native American chamber as well as a variety of other ones, but the Women's Chamber, I just would like to see it more expanded to than just employment centers, because those seem to, in my mind, constitute large numbers of folks, and I'm really concerned about really the silent numbers of those really small communities and businesses. Mikasa, who works with women, business owners, just making sure we're really looking across the board at a variety of them. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, Director. And I see that Mr. Soroy has raised his hand. Would you like to comment on this as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add to Carl and Chris's feedback. I think the other thing that I've identified with the group is that, with the past program feedback panel, we do need to look at small and medium employers on that, and we don't want to only focus on large. And I think we are targeting some of those groups too as well. So to add to what Carl said is that, beyond kind of some of those small disadvantaged businesses that we may access through some of the chambers and some other forces, we are going to also be targeting through on the past program panel as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soroy and Mr. Green and Director. That was appreciate that very much. Director Cook.
Thanks. Briefly, the Denver Post editorial over the weekend mentioned that we have tabled plans to reduce fares for low-income riders. I didn't know what that meant, first of all, and I don't even know if it's a reflection of the interview that they had with some of you. But is the idea of reducing or making our fares more affordable still a part of this study, whether it's for a targeted group or overall?
The CEO and General Manager Johnson's hand up. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Director Cook, if I may, in relationship to the comment that you just raised about the Denver Post editorial, we had conversation about that. That appears to be a misprint that was never indicated by us. And going forward, and I'll defer to the team, but clearly the whole notion behind this is ensuring that we have fares that are simple and affordable. So that would be part of it as well. But I'll yield the floor to the project team to expound on that if you'd like. Thank you.
Yeah, we would have nothing to add in that. Yet our intent is to simplify and ensure affordability. So we have, at this point, all options are on the table.
Okay. One other, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Okay, when we go to evaluate alternatives, they use I think, an industry standard for elasticity of demand. But I'm wondering if, if we can take some extra time to look at that or make sure it's up to date in light of changes in travel patterns with the pandemic there, and also with the great disparity, the terrible increase in housing costs and all the implications that has in terms of how people weigh other costs. So can you do that, or are you able to do that in the course of this study?
Yeah, we'll be, the modeling that we're relying on is, we're going to have to mix and match between some of the information that we have that is obviously pre-pandemic, but then also match that against trends that we're seeing since the onset of that. So there is going to be some art and science as we move forward.
Just try to make sure it's one that's been updated or something. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. That's all, Mr. Chair.
And Mr. Chair, if I could add to that, this is Bill Soroy. The other thing, I think the advantage of doing our peer review and talking with other agencies about how they're seeing impacts to ridership and impacts to their fares and how people are responding, I think will give us some good information that we can, add to our analysis and look at that overall.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Director, and thank you for those answers. Director Deschelle.
Thank you, Director Davidson. I think I very much understand and appreciate that when we originally did this, we said, okay, it's going to be an 18-month study. The other side of that is when I look at an implementation timeline, if we're delivered report in April of 23 and implementation is TBD, that might mean my entire term has been, okay, we're going to do a fair equity study. We approved a fair equity study. It takes an entire director's term to see a fair change. And I would just encourage you all, as we think about implementation, to shoot for the moon. Is it outside resources? Is it not something we can throw money at? Is it not that we have a lot of money to spend? But really think through how we can have a quick implementation, because people need help yesterday. And I know there's only so much we can do with the legislative changes that we just got, but for the folks who are low income, who are spending $10 a day on a regional fare because they've been priced out of where they live, that's a lot for them. And are there ways that we can ramp up the LIFT program? There's other things we can look at to hopefully provide people relief while we wait for the next year and a half, 2 years, until we really have fares going, if we do reduce fares based on the study.
Thank you, Director. I see Ms. Johnson has raised her hand. Perhaps like to comment on that?
I would, and thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And Director Deschelle, we really appreciate your comments. Recognizing what Mr. Green outlined is that this agency has never done something of this magnitude, and recognizing that we want to ensure that we are outreaching to populations that oftentimes are the greatest ones that are marginalized. This is going to take some due diligence, and it's the intent, quite naturally, to expedite. After we all met, we thought it was in our best interest to manage everyone's expectations and not put forward a schedule that we thought would not be realistic and have to come back. But quite naturally, as we go forward with this process and working with, community-based organizations and things of the like, and equity panels, we're very hopeful that we could get something shored up. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that, because oftentimes, and I'm not trying to point fingers, but this is really a first for this agency. And I think it will yield the results that we ultimately all want to see in reference to having simplistic fares going forward. But want you to know that the comments haven't fallen upon deaf ears, and the team brought that forward to me. And I'm speaking up because I want to support them, because they were wanting to put this forward, and we wanted you all to know what was taking place, and I see them smiling. So I will yield the floor, but I just wanted you to know that we want to do this right and ensure that we have long-term relief for individuals. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Did anyone else from the team want to respond to that as well? Saw those smiles coming up as well.
You guys are great, and the plan is amazing. It's very much appreciated, and just trying to think about the folks. What can we do today for some folks who are struggling.
Thank you very much for the comments. Scanning through saw some thumbs up there as I scanned through the video. So, Director Geisinger.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this. This is some really great work. I'm really excited about this. I think the feedback panels are well thought out. I guess I would encourage you to start talking to them soon, or do we have the right goals in place? Certainly, I think, the three major topics, but, is there anything we're missing in terms of actually the targets that we're setting there? Because I think we learn a lot. I'm reminded that we had the EcoPass or the PASS program working group, and I don't think people on that group left very satisfied. And then as I understand it, the results of doing the utilization pricing has not been very, very satisfying to the staff. So I'm very excited about this new plan. I hope we can look back at what happened there and make sure that we're avoiding those issues. Thanks.
Thank you for the comments, Director Geisinger. And yeah, seeing no other hands, I just would echo the sentiment. Thank you for bringing this forward. Again, a very clear presentation with a clear plan. And Mr. Quinn, Mr. Van Meter, Mr. Green, Mr. Soroy, I appreciate all the comments here and the help in understanding the timeline. And having a nice organized timeline is great. And I just would certainly thank the team for, I've said this before, but the organization and then also the focus on customers. I know this is, we can start seeing some of our strategic plans, values run through a lot of what we're doing and see a lot of consistency in our efforts. Organization, as small as it may be, just even the slideware, the way we communicate, the way we talk about it. And so appreciate that, appreciate the focus on customer. Thank you very, very much. Are there any further comments on this matter, discussion items or questions? All right. Seeing none, I think we can stop sharing the screen and I'm going to move on. Thank you for the patience, everybody. I know some of you had to hang out there for a lengthy discussion as well, so thank you. Moving to other matters, are there other matters to discuss? Director Geisinger.
Thank you very much. I'll keep this short. I wish I had thought of it earlier when I think we still have most people, but not everyone. We are moving forward with the retreat. We're honing in on getting a facilitator. I'm hoping we'll have something to report by the end of this week even, and on that regard. And as you recall, we sent out, I think Ms. McManus sent out a few weeks ago the scope of work that's part of the RFQ for the facilitator. Before we started that, we asked all directors to give us feedback on what you'd like to discuss at the board retreat, and we attached those comments to the RFQ. I'm pretty sure they were still attached, and distilled those into 4 topics. But the facilitator will be calling all board members to talk about what we want to raise in the retreat. So you can be thinking about that. I would just say in that regard that we've had a lot of press since we first went around and asked for people's opinions, and most recently the Denver Post editorial, also the Ghost Train and the earlier comments. And whether we agree with all the particulars or not, I guess I've been impressed that all people are coming together, those and others that we're hearing, and are saying, hey, we need more transit and we need more money and we need to help RTD. And so I'm hoping that we'll start to think in our retreat, at least start to think about how we look at some of these issues in a bigger way, and how we bring in those voices and start to move towards various ideas of how we might get more money. So It's just a side piece, but you will be getting a phone call and we will be updating you on the facilitator and all of that soon. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Director Geisinger, and thank you for driving a lot in the leadership and getting a lot of that arranged and moving. Appreciate that. Any other matters from other directors? All right. Well, hey, the next meeting will be Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. Very much appreciate all of you being here, and I know we went a little bit long, but thank you for the discussion. Seeing no further discussion, this meeting will be adjourned at 8:23 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Have a wonderful night, everybody.